Thank you very much, Olaf. Very interesting presentation. I would like to invite Professor Tim Cable from Aspire Academy to give us his data, which are quite important because Aspire Academy is a sports science organization who is contacted every day thousands of young athletes and is able to collect valuable data. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Kostas, and thank you, Dr. Mohammed and colleagues from the ADLQ for inviting me to talk. I'm going to shift gears slightly and give you quite an applied talk. I want to talk about the work that we do in the Academy, and then finish by suggesting some touch points that we could use to work with colleagues in anti-doping. So what I'm going to look at is the role of the Aspire Academy, the challenges that we face, how we go about identifying young, talented athletes in this country, provide some context of the data for health surveillance, and, as I said, look at some potential touch points for anti-doping messages. What we're obsessed with at the minute in the Academy is trying to identify where the future athletes that will represent the state of Qatar in future Olympics and international events are. So, for example, we're now trying to find the 11-year-old athletes that might represent Qatar in 2024. So our mission in the Academy is to identify and attract the most promising sporting talent into the Academy using progressive evidence-based scouting and talent ID protocols. And then once they're in the Academy at age 12, our mission then is to enhance sports performance using the very highest quality coaching integrated with innovative applied sports science that develops talent to national pathways for success. And following on from other speakers, it's very much a part of the Qatar National Vision for 2030 in that we support the work of many sports federations in the country and the work of the QOC, in that we're establishing operational athlete development pathways that identify and support and nurture talented young athletes from the ages of 11 to 18. And what we're now starting to do is provide scholarships for our graduates after they've finished in the Academy. We do face a number of challenges, unlike other countries around the world. Qatar is a state, as you all know, that has a very small population. So our mission is to find the diamonds in that small population. So just for example, if you compare the population of Qatar with other countries, large countries like China, India, through some European countries into Gulf states, you can see the population is small. The total population of males between the age of 0 to 15 is very small, and that's our target population. So that's what we're trying to identify from that small population. There's also low levels of activity in our society here, so we have to concentrate on building fitness fast, and part of that relates to a lack of PE in schools. And so we also need to try and accelerate skill development when people come into our program. Another limitation on physical activity and skill development that we face is the limited outdoor activity because of the climate. We need to create a performance culture, a high performance culture that's slightly different here than other countries. And one of the major challenges we face is the problem that sports performance is not seen as a great career pathway for many sons of families relative to engineering or medicine or law, for example. However, having said that, we work across this range of sports. So we work from football, athletics, some racket sports, squash, table tennis, into some precision sports, shooting and fencing. And we work with other federations such as the Golf Federation and the Swimming Federation. In the interest of time, what I'm going to focus on is the non-football sports that we work with. So what I'd like to take a few minutes to explain is our pre-Aspire talent identification process. And what you see on the right-hand side here is the methods we employ in young female Qatari girls. And we have the MSSD program, the Multi-Sport Skills Development Program for girls, which builds fundamental movement skills and basic sports skills at a beginner level, takes them through basic sports coaching into advanced sports coaching, and we're now seeing a very high number of those girls entering federation sport in specialisation sports and representing the country on a national level. Indeed, we have 47 of our athletes now representing federation sports in the country at a female national level. Relative to that, we also have a multi-sport skills development program for boys. This commences at age 8 in clustered groups around Doha, and that goes through to the age of 12, 13. What that program is about is developing the core athletic competencies and skill sets that are required for those sports that I mentioned. Alongside that, we now go into every state school in Qatar at grade 6, so 11-year-old boys, and we perform what we call our bronze testing. And what this testing does in a morning of the school session is it measures key performance capabilities that are the foundation of those sports of interest. So we measure endurance capacity, we measure strength, we measure power, we measure speed, and we measure body composition. And we do that in around about 3,000 boys. And then we take the top 10% of those boys and we go into our next level of talent ID in the academy, which is silver testing, where we repeat some of those tests and do some more psychological testing around motivation and determination. We also receive nominations from our colleagues in the federations for boys to come into that silver testing. And out of the 150 boys that partake in that silver testing, 70 to 80 move forward to a 2-day camp of gold testing in the academy. And out of that gold testing comes 35 to 40 nominations into those sports that we're interested in, into the academy at age 12, where the boys then perform their schooling for 6 years, their elite coaching supported by our sports science team, with a view to producing the future champions for the state of Qatar in those sports of identification. What we're also starting this year is in grades 2, 3, 4 and 5, our colleagues in the schools are helping us perform bronze testing in those early grades so that we can get much more surveillance on the fitness capabilities of the boys as they move through those different age ranges. And then they will end up at bronze testing for entry into the academy. But we'll be more certain of their talent. What we're also doing is transferring prospectively talented boys out of the pre-Aspire screenings at grades 2, 3, 4 and 5 into the multi-sport skill development programs so that we can really enhance the learning of those skills at a much earlier age so that we're enhancing the quality of athletic competencies before they come into our main testing program. So here's some data that we've collected over the recent years. You can see along the bottom axis the years that we've collected data from 2008 right through to this year. And that graph you see there is the number of grade 7 students screened in Qatari schools. You can see when we commenced this progress, we were nearly up to this process, we were nearly up to 3,000 students. We took a dip in 2010 where we couldn't gain access to the schools that we needed. So the school teachers, we invited them to send their best athletes into the academy, and we were testing 700 individuals on an annual basis. But now we have, with a strong relationship with the Supreme Education Council, access to all the schools again, and we've just tested 3,000 boys between October and December in 2013. And this is some of the data that we have. So we've measured body mass index in these individuals, And you can see across the years there on the left-hand side, it fluctuates around about a body mass index of 2021. So that's actually no different from international standards, and doesn't really reflect high levels of obesity in this age group in the school population. If you move to the right-hand side, the bottom graph on the right-hand side, that's our measure of endurance capacity called maximum oxygen consumption. And this gives us some information of an individual's capacity to perform endurance sports in the future. So it's an important core competency of athletic ability. And again, what you see is no real change across the years there in the data set. But I can tell you that those values are significantly lower than you might see in international standards in other countries around the world. So there is an issue around fitness in these 11, 12-year-old boys. So if we start on this in our search for talent for 2024, if you start at the bottom of this slide, we go through that talent ID process and recruitment into the academy. When the student athletes come into the academy at grade 7, they go into a curricular-based foundation year. And that foundation year is there to improve their sporting skills and their functional movement skills. And then after they move through that year, they go into grade 8 and 9, where we have a multi-sport program which is about athletic development. So developing all those core competencies that we understand from our academic literature pursuit are vital for the sports that we're looking for. So we're developing skill. At the same time, they're specializing in their sports of interest. But it might be that they've been nominated for jumping in athletics, and we identify that they have a really strong skill set for squash or table tennis, so we're able to talent transfer them to different sports, for example. At the end of grade 9, they're really identified for a specialist sport. And in grades 10 and 11 and 12, they receive high-quality coaching in the sports that you can see named there: throwing, jumping, sprinting, endurance in athletics, the racket sports, and the precision sports. So then they're on a performance pathway for 3 years. And in that performance group, there are a handful of those athletes that will graduate and that we will provide a scholarship and sports science and medical support as they travel the world, learning their sporting trade in an international setting. And hopefully we're setting them up for a long athletic successful career for the state of Qatar. This is a complicated diagram. I'll just talk you through it. This is our Aspire Talent Development Model. I've spoken about some of this already. Along the bottom, you see the year of grade, starting at grade 2 through to post-graduation at grade 13. As I said, we've got the pre-Aspire screening in the schools on the left-hand side. The good candidates move into the multi-sports development program. They get bronze tested, silver tested, gold tested, and then entry into the program. After the foundation year, it's more multi-sports, and then after grade 10, it's specific specialized coaching with a view to those athletes making world standard times or competition metrics, standards for the Asian Games, standards for the Arab Games, the GCC, or national standards. What we're about is trying to enhance the potential of each individual athlete to get them to the highest performance capability that they have. And so what Olaf was just talking about is very much about following individual metrics and understanding the individual metrics so that we can really enhance their performance to those standards. So the first few years when our athletes are with us, it's about developing sports skills pedagogy, the understanding of movement, the understanding of skills. And in the latter years, it's very much about technique coaching, physical capacity coaching in the context of their sport. What we do in the performance years, so years 10 to 12, is we very much have a service team approach. the athlete-coach nexus is the important component. The athlete is the essential component of what we do. That's why they sit in the middle of this diagram. With the coach and the athlete, we wrap around sports science support around that periodized training plan. So we offer physiological, biochemical, psychological, strength and conditioning, biomechanical, physiotherapy, and nutritional support. And the philosophy is one of individual continuous enhancement for that athlete by periodized training plans that are integrated with the coach and the sports science team and also the sports medicine team to look after the health care of that individual athlete. But again, I'd stress it's about continuous enhancement across the age range from 12 to 18. So some data. Here's a measure of power. You can see the green dots are our mean data of age group athletes from 12 to 18 that have been collected over the last 8 years. You can see progressive improvement in counter movement jump, progressive increases in power. I'd just like you to note that the last data point, the green data point at age 18, if I can point it over here, that's a measure of 45. It's not important that it's 45 until you look at the next curve. These are world standards for power outputs relative to age. And what you see on the left-hand curve here is that on an international level, athletes are reaching a level of 45. So we're very much able to get our athletes to the same international standards that exist around the world. The same is true. This is a measure of endurance capacity. You can see that our athletes increase their endurance capacity from 12 to 15, and then it plateaus off. This is very much the same sort of pattern that occurs in the rest of the world. You can see the top line here for boys plateaus at age 15. So we're getting very much the same responses with our Qatar-based athletes that the rest of the world are seeing. What's the relevance of all this data other than producing champions for the country? Well, it could have potential important health surveillance questions and issues, because in all the screening that we do, so here you see the school screening from grade 1 to grade 6. That's normative data. Yes, it's athletic data, but some of the metrics that we measure are important health metrics. So they are important to the SEC and the Ministry of Health. And we hope to utilize those in those agencies for the benefit of the country. So just following on from that, some of these fitness variables are really important. Here you see a study from the British Journal of Sports Medicine in 2014, looking at the risk factors for all-cause mortality around the globe for men and women. The point of this slide is, if you look on the left-hand side, the largest risk you can have of dying from anything is having low cardiorespiratory fitness. That's what CRF stands for, low cardiorespiratory fitness. There's more risk associated with low cardiorespiratory fitness than combining obesity, smoking, and diabetes together. So that's a focus for all countries around the world, is to try and increase the levels of cardiorespiratory fitness. So we're surveilling that in these 11, 12-year-old boys and earlier. In terms of physical activity, here you see physical activity levels in selected countries around this region. If you look at high-income countries like the UAE on the far right-hand side, you can see high levels of inactivity. And if you look in, sorry, this is slightly unclear, but if you look at for the state of Qatar underlined there, you can see around about 50% of the total population in Qatar are deemed insufficiently physically active. The next one across is overweightness. There's about 70% of the population that are overweight and 33% of the population, this is adult data of course, 33% of the population are obese. That's a body mass index greater than 30. So we're surveilling this information in the very young people of Qatar. So it's a vital source of health of the nation data. Inactivity is very important, or being physically active is very important, because we now know, again, the risk of dying from anything relates to your level of physical activity. So on this chart, you've got levels of physical activity at the bottom, moving from poor to high, and you can see the risk, the relative risk of dying from anything. This is cancers, cardiovascular disease, metabolic disease, even traffic accidents reduce as your level of physical activity goes up. So it's important that we surveil this stuff, this information in all age groups of the population. So where are the potential touch points for anti-doping messages? So I put this slide up earlier. This is our performance pathway through the academy. If you look on the left-hand side, I've put an arrow there. It would be really fascinating to introduce into our sports academy, and our sports academy is unique in the world, an anti-doping curriculum to teach future prospective athletes all the nuances around anti-doping, the risks, the processes as an athlete that they're going to go through in competing internationally, and we could profile that curriculum and research that curriculum. Another touch point might be the MSSD programs, the multi-sport skill development programs, and also the bronze testing in the 3,000 boys in the school. This could potentially be a good touch point for selling anti-doping messages to the younger population, and also to do qualitative type research, getting opinions about drugs in sports and what's understood in these age groups. So that's another possibility. And then finally, I think with our service team approach, where we wrap the sports science support tightly around the athlete and the coach, I think this area gives us the possibility to do research around biological passports and other anti-doping research that might be more specific in nature. So I think the work of the academy in trying to identify champions for the state of Qatar is a good resource to work alongside all the colleagues in the room from an anti-doping perspective. So thank you for your attention. I've looked at the role of the Aspire Academy and our challenges, and I think I've offered some way forward of where we might work together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tim. Before moving to our discussion for the presentations of this second session, I would like to invite Dr. Mohammed Al-Sairafi to present the gifts to our speakers. I would like to invite our friends and colleagues from the audience to present their opinion and their questions to the to our speakers in this second session, please. Yes, Mohammed.
My question is actually for
Please wait.
Rabin. Very interesting talk, thank you very much. And I was just wondering about what is the percentage of shared information from some companies from the big clinical versus the clinical? Are they more protective of their big medical research because it still hasn't materialized and hasn't been patented enough, or do they share stuff very early on?
Okay, well, it's easy. Our main interests are the drugs that are going to be applicable to humans. So usually the turning point is the end of phase 2, phase 2B to phase 3. This is usually the time when we've got a wealth of information on the drugs. And also, I would say the company is more ready to share information because they have to share this information via the investigators' brochures to the investigators. The drug is usually well formulated at that time and well understood by the company. So it's usually about the time when it's good to have a good discussion with the companies. Now, it's very possible that some new drugs, new concepts, can be of interest to us way before they enter the phase 2, when there are some new drugs affecting the blood production, for example, or the muscles. These drugs, we monitor them usually from preclinical to the early clinical phases, and then if they continue the development, it's about during the phase 2, as I said, phase 2B, that there is a higher interest. Now, we've got to be careful because there are thousands of drugs that do not make it from phase 1 to phase 2, and certainly even more from phase 2 to phase 3. So we have to be selective in the way we can approach this. But again, I think our global rule is around phase 2B is an appropriate time.
Thank you so much from this very good and high quality of symposium. And I am very happy I came from Iran, and thanks a lot, Dr. Mohammad Seyrafi, to organize this. I have a question from Professor Schumacher, and regarding the biological passport. We know how much important it is, but my question is how much obligation we can do for countries or athletes to make this biological passport. For example, before Asian game or European game, Olympic game, how many countries they can prepare this, or what about the financial case?
Well, thanks for the question. There's different programs in place. So there's some national anti-doping agencies who implement the passport on a national level. And then there's also federations, for example, cycling or track and field or skiing, who implement the passport from a federation level for their top level athletes. So it's a little bit of an approach, and I think one of the main projects of WADA is at the moment, correct me if I'm wrong, to somehow harmonize this and to determine who does what, who looks after which athlete. Do the international federation only look after the top ones, and the regional or national anti-doping agencies look more after the young athletes before they go into the top feeder? So I think it's a bit of the initiative of the country to apply for a passport program. So, but it's also a legal question, or maybe a question for my colleagues from WADA, where they're way better placed to answer this. Do you want to comment on it?
I can give it a try. Thank you, Jörg. Dr. Pugazemi, I think it's very important to understand that the passport, first of all, is an addition to the existing program. It doesn't substitute to the activities that you are currently running in your national anti-doping organization. And it's something that is well established in, as Jörg mentioned, many other federations or national anti-doping organization, and there is a way to tailor it to your capacity and to your needs. Very recently, there was a very good article of a federation that said, where do I start the athlete biological passport? Well, you have to start by saying, okay, we need to make a step into that direction. This is something that for our sport or our country we cannot ignore. And there are ways and means to develop it. I would say to start not necessarily very big, but to start with the core of your population and grow. This is a fairly long-term investment. You want, as Jörg presented, it's not 1 or 2 samples collected per athlete that is going to make the difference. But ultimately, you've got a much better control of some of the variables, parameters that you monitor over time that is going to give you a much better picture on your population. As illustrated at the data that were presented for cycling, you've got a long-term view over the years of your population, and that gives you a much better monitoring and targeting of the suspicious data, but monitoring of your population. So you don't need to start very big at the beginning. You need to really install the program for some of the key athletes in your country or some of the key sports, and then you can grow from there.
If I might add, and I can maybe give the word to the floor, because I know there's some people in here who have actually started passport programs on a national level on a very small basis, I think with 10 athletes. They've chosen the 10 most, let's say, the strongest athletes in the sports that are relevant to the passport endurance sports. And they've started monitoring, and then every year they added 10 more. And by now it's quite reasonable programs.
I would like Luis.
Good morning, Luis Horta from the Anti-Doping Authority of Portugal. First, a comment about the biological passport program. We had a strong biological passport program in Portugal, and I think if we think about the costs and the effectiveness of this program, I think it's a very good investment. A very good investment. The blood collection, it's a little bit expensive. The blood analysis, it's not expensive. And the results management is expensive. But I think all of us must think in putting some money of the normal strategy in the biological passport strategy. And I'm speaking now about only the hematological model. I have 2 questions. One for both of you, Tim Cable and Olaf Schumacher, about the collection of samples in a very early stage of the career of one athlete in order to try to see manipulation in a later stage of the career of one athlete, thinking that this sample collected in a very early stage maybe is the physiological, a true physiological sample of the athlete. Then I was thinking in this experience of the expired academy in doing that. The other question is to you, or Professor Olaf Schumacher, about the importance of the biological passport to try to find pathologies. It's not the main objective of biological passport, but what I want to know from you, it's using your huge experience in biological passport as expert panel, what is the duty of and the obligations of one athlete biological passport management unit to go to the medical doctor of one athlete when we discovered something that is related to one pathology. have we the obligation to do that or no? Thank you.
So let me try to answer the first question first, and then maybe hand the second one over to Olivier, because it's the legal implications are quite important of the pathologies found in the biological passport, and there's been a question of ongoing debate on exactly that topic with many involved parties, as you will know. Now, to collect samples from a very young athlete has obviously limitation, as you has correctly pointed out, because obviously up until puberty and even a little bit afterwards, biological markers change quite a bit in the human being. Think of testosterone in young adults, it will go up, you know. Hemoglobin values will change, obviously, because of different composition of the blood at different ages. So I think there's a certain limitation regarding age, and I would put that limitation about puberty to answer your question. So I think once puberty is over, you can probably start 16, 17, 18, but not earlier, I would think, from biological passport anti-doping point of view.
I'll just come in there. I mean, what we routinely do is screen our athletes 3 times a year from age 12. So that's a full blood profile, for example, some other markers. But we take a full range of physiological maturation markers that can contribute to the creation of a biological passport for a number of variables for those athletes. But I would agree with Professor Schumacher that the real stability of those measured would come post-puberty.
Yes, thank you. And I would add to what you were saying by indicating that when we are going to move, and we are currently exploring these areas about the endocrine module and also some of the omic markers. Some of the omic markers that we could consider in the future, I think the element of puberty is even more striking. I mean, that's one of the period of life when the morphology changes the most, and by far, I think, outweigh some of the changes that are going to be related to doping. But certainly something that we keep in mind, and we've been approaching this issue with human growth hormone, measurement of human growth hormone. Now, to answer your previous question as well, when we are collecting for the purpose of anti-doping, we are not conducting health checks. This is completely separate. And the purpose of collecting those samples is purely for anti-doping activities. So we cannot be bound to any, I would say, medical or health issue, because this is not the purpose of the collection, and this is not the purpose of the testing. Now, of course, there is another element as well, is the people who look at the data are not necessarily people who are trained to identify pathologies. I think in particular people in anti-doping labs do not necessarily have the training, they are not medical doctors, and do not necessarily have the training to identify pathologies. Now, what we agreed upon is that, of course, in the course of analysis, when some potential pathologies are identified, there should be a process in the system that allows the information to be transferred either to the person or to the physician of the athlete, so that this information can be used properly. And we've seen several cases over the years. This is certainly not a general trend, but you know, in particular with HCG, when some tumors have been detected because of anti-doping analysis, initial anti-doping analysis, and then when the element related to doping could be put aside, of course, there was an issue that was related to health and the information properly transferred. But we've got to be very careful in the way this information is used, again, because this is not the purpose of the anti-doping tests. That's one thing. And secondly, because the people handling the information related to anti-doping are not trained to analyze this from a pathological perspective or from a medical perspective.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Dr. Juan Manuel Alonso from Aspetar. I also came here wearing the hat of the ADLQ and Medical Anti-Doping Commission Chairman. And I would like to comment with Luis Horta these two issues about the recollection of data and samples from minors, and the medical issues that are coming from the abnormal results. Concerning the first comment, in ADLF we are trying to recuperate data also from minors, from under 18 athletes. But in some countries we can have some legal restraints. So we are trying to implement all data or to implement the tests only when we have a scenario that allow us to do it, because we are in Europe or in a country that facilitate us to take the data. And in any case, we are trying to minimize the number of data and samples collected from under 18. Although that we estimate that could be a very nice print for the future for the top athletes when they will become top level athletes in the future. So we consider this is a very nice, interesting area, but it's difficult to enter in. Concerning the medical abnormalities that are coming from the athlete biological passport samples, we face a very difficult scenario, because in ADLF we decided in the last two World Championships in Daegu 2011 and in Moscow 2013 to test all participant athletes. That meant 1,900 samples from all over the world. So we had to expect to manage difficult cases. We had very unusual values, and I just give you, for instance, the sample of ferritin values of 3,000, 5,000 units. And anemia also, 10 grams per deciliter of hemoglobin. So we decided to implement a protocol within ADLF. So of course we are doctors dealing with anti-doping data, but we are doctors, so we have an obligation. We are bound to act. So we can't ignore the fact that we are in front of an abnormal ferritin value of hemoglobin very low. So we decided to implement a program. So each time we have an abnormal value, we are approaching directly the athlete. So we are always trying to avoid the member federation, the national federation. So we are trying to directly approach the athlete, send them the result on the address that they facilitated in the doping form, which is not always the most accurate address. And we are in difficulties that we are receiving back the letters or the emails that we are sending. But we are trying to approach directly the athletes and communicate them that we identify some potential medical abnormalities, and we recommend them to go to the general practitioner or the sport medicine doctor to try to start an investigation. Thank you.
Yes, and of course, Juan Manuel, a follow-up question. What if the abnormal value is related to doping and not a pathology? It means in that situation, you're potentially giving the athlete directly an information that is under the radar, of course, but you're providing basically the tool to say to this person, we are not going to sanction you even if it's potentially doping, and an escape door in a sense. And that's the risk we are facing. And I know there is a constant debate around this, and that's good to have a healthy debate. At the same time, and this is where the angle may vary a little bit between physicians and the people who are non-physicians in anti-doping, where you say, where do you need to place the alert to the athlete or the physician of the athlete? Is it immediately when you find an abnormal value, or should you allow, in a sense, the anti-doping process to continue a little bit, but quickly enough that if there is a pathology, then it can be dealt with on time? So there is, I think, this period of time, in my view, that is very critical, during which we need to try to clarify whether it can be related to doping or whether it can be related to a pathology almost before acting vis-a-vis either the athlete or the entourage of the athlete. I think Olaf.
Yes, let me bring up one other element to your attention. The athlete has access to his values. So the values of the passport are usually stored in atoms, and then the athlete can access them, so he can see the values. And if he wants to, can make the call together with his team physician himself. I would agree personally with the view that Olivier outlined just now, that it's primarily an anti-doping sample and not a health sample.
I would like to use my privilege and and ask one question to Alanud. As Alanud has an experience in analyzing food supplements in Qatar, suppose that you would like yourself personally consume one food supplement that it could contain a prohibited substance, a risky substance. What you would wish to be a governmental measure that could prevent you to use this supplement? What do you think from your experience that could be more useful and more effective, that could create the environment and the conditions that conditions could prevent you to use food supplements that may contain a substance that is risky for your health?
Of course. Hello? No? It's working. Of course, the first thing would be the public health awareness. Not everyone understands the causes and the consequences that come with taking supplements and the harm that is associated with it. My bachelor's project was done on the supplements and the kind of supplements that athletes or bodybuilders are consuming. And from what we have found, that most of them don't even understand what are the side effects that are associated with them. All they cared about was the instant effect that they are getting from it. So I think that we need to increase the awareness, get people to understand it from a younger age, get specialized trainers who understand supplements from a scientific way, not just from an athletic side of view. And that will be, I believe, a most effective way.
Thank you very much. Can we ask for the last question, please? Makoto?
Makoto Ueki from Tokyo. May I ask you a question regarding athlete passport? In the former times, it was long before starting of athlete passport test. We have several cases of elevated hemoglobin level cases athletes, and whose EPO level was also high. But there was almost no people who can make a decision, and one influencing physician said it is polycythemia, because the parameter was looked stable, both hemoglobin and EPO, but as a life scientist, I had concern. So in my feeling, for athlete passport test, so testing itself, interpretation is more important than testing itself sometimes, because as Olivia mentioned, hormone-producing tumor can affect the values, and also we cannot be sure. You cannot sure all the influencing factors. So if such kind of case, elevated hemoglobin with high EPO, and people involved in the case could not make a decision, how can we solve the problems? At that moment, ADAMS didn't exist, so we were not able to obtain WADA's proposal.
Yeah. So in such a case, basically, is you have a case which is not clear to you. So the process to clarify these cases is to do additional testing. And if I had been the expert in such a case with consistently high hemoglobin values, I would have probably looked at the competition schedule and tested the athlete at the time where he's very, very unlikely to dope. So maybe in winter, in October, when he's not training or something like that. And then I would have compared the values, the very high values, with the out-of-competition values. And if it's still high, then I would probably have agreed with polycythemia. But you said it's all about the interpretation, but the interpretation can only be as good as the test scheduling and the test timing. So that's a key element of the passport. So the organization that schedules the test must be quite knowledgeable about the sports where it tests, to put the test at the right time point and to catch the athlete at distinct periods where he might dope or where he might not dope, to get a clear indication about the profile. There, let me just, polycythemia is very rare in young athletes. It's very rare. And you know that the most common polycythemia is a condition that occurs at 60 years plus, and we don't have that many 60-year plus elite athletes. Couple of genetic causes, but very rare.
In fact, I do not see any problem with hematological module because it is well evaluated, but for steroid profile of urine, urinary steroid profile of urine, so analysis is very complicated, and the parameter is we need to see a lot of parameters. So for such a kind of modules, in my opinion, we need to evaluate with genotype as well.
Yes, please.
Yes, Makoto. Well, genotyping is something we start to stay away from, at least for the moment. I hear you for the steroid profiling, and we know very well some of the genetic profiling that can give you different ways of metabolism, as you know, with the UGT and so forth. For now, we can assess it from the end, I would say, knowing, you know, you start from the early values and you can assess almost the polymorphism of the person. It doesn't mean in the future we may not have to go a bit deeper into genotyping, but certainly that would be really on a need basis. I mean, measuring the added value to the profiling and how this profile, I mean, the genotyping helps us to distinguish between a normal profile and a doping profile. The other element I would like to remind to all of us is that from the difference between the traditional analysis in urine or blood and the passport is that the passport, you've got the APMU, you've got the human eye before you report it as an atypical finding or an adverse passport finding. So there is a layer in the management of the results we've got with a passport that we do not necessarily have with direct analysis for obvious reasons, obviously. But the other thing is that, and we've seen this, I mean, we refer to Tyler Hamilton. When we had the Tyler Hamilton case in 2004, we were told about the vanishing twin. I mean, nobody really thought about it before, and up to a point where, you know, we had to address this. So, I mean, our athletes are very creative. I mean, they challenge us. As you know, we have to be reasonable in the way we look at the challenges. And you think in terms of complexity, I think wait until we come with the endocrine module, because I think that's probably going to be one of the most complex that we ever developed. But the benefit, and I totally agree with Olaf, is that by adding the points, and you've got a clearer view of what's going on, you know, for a given profile. And I think the next step will be to combine the different profiles, because you know very well that some drugs that have an effect on blood also have an effect on the steroid profile, will have an effect also on the endocrine profile. So all this in the end will be connected. We simply have to do it stepwise, which is less visible in terms of integration of the information.
I would like to thank the speakers of this second session. Thank you very much.